Welcome back to yet another episode of Rabbit Hole Stories. Today we had an anonymous person here with us, or pseudonymous person, if you want to call it that. He goes by Do Not Comply or DN Comply on Bitcoin Twitter. Mate, I love this one. It was a fascinating conversation. He's obviously a deep thinker. He can articulate himself very well, and he obviously spends a lot of time sort of contemplating what Bitcoin is and the value it brings about in the world. So a lot of sort of talk on the meta scale. What did you get from the episode?
So it was very jam-packed. Sometimes it was a lot to process for me, but that was more because it was like past 11 p.m. My time, so it was quite a late recording for me. And even more...
It was past your bedtime,
Yeah, it was
Joel.
past my bedtime. But even more... well, yeah, technically around that time, I do actually lie in bed. I just don't go to sleep. But even more impressive is it was 6 a.m. his time, and he was on from the get-go, so a lot of great talks and a lot of good resources also that he shared with us. So make sure to check the show notes. And don't want to hold you back. Just listen to a cool episode between us three. Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode here on Rabbit Hole Stories. And today it is our first episode where we have someone with a anon account, a pseudonym, whatever, on, and it's DN Comply. How has your day been so far?
Pretty new. I just got up about 30 minutes ago at 5:30 in the morning here in Japan. But off to a good start, drinking a little coffee, and we've had this scheduled for about a week, so I'm really I've been looking forward to finally chatting with you guys.
I've been dependent on coffee every morning now for at least the last, I don't know when, couple of decades. And I at least now have to have 2 cups of coffee before I'm even functional. I don't know if that's the same for you, DN Comply, but it's become somewhat of a morning routine.
Well, I spend a lot of time reading up on health and nutrition, and there is really, really solid evidence that a cup of coffee or 2 a day is quite good for you. Like there aren't too many things in nutrition that you can be sure of without a shadow of a doubt. But the fact that coffee is a healthful addition to your diet is quite clear. So that's reassuring, ain't it?
Yeah, definitely, because obviously you hear all different sorts of opinions about these things, and we can probably segue into sort of conspiracy theories and science and mainstream media and how we get sort of discombobulated with the constant information coming our way under the name of science, and going down a rabbit hole. Going down a rabbit hole makes you question everything, and one of those is the narratives that you've been fed throughout your life, right? So, when you start to hear these alternative things, coffee's actually good for you, actually, and it can sort of do all these benefits to your health. Have you got any opinion about that, or is that completely an alien concept to you? I mean, I've gone off on a tangent, so.
No, not at all. I mean, almost everything I was taught as a child turned out to be wrong by now. I mean, the longer you live, the more you realize that things that were unquestioned as true, 30, 40 years ago, just turn out to be completely bogus. I think, just in the most, in the simplest terms, I mean, I'm in my 50s now, but I think when I was in my teens and 20s, anyone who thought that JFK might have been, bumped off by more than one gunman was considered to be, of questionable sanity. I mean, to even question that was really beyond the pale. And now it's like if you don't realize that something pretty sinister went down in 1961, I don't know what to tell you.
Do you actually know that the word conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA to cover up a lot of the misfortunes with the JFK assassination? So ever since, the whole fucking word has been all around in the world somehow, somewhere out there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can tell you that I have spent the I don't know if you read Dave Collins' annual year in review, but I've helped to edit the last two of them, and those are really good. He's working on the 2023 one right now, and I guess hopefully that'll be out in the next month or so. But I think I'm going to get the opportunity to read that over beforehand and give him my comments and so forth. So that's like he's a professor of chemistry at Cornell, and just one of the most widely read and interesting thinkers you're going to meet. And I think it's my nature to not to not be suspicious and not to look for conspiracies. But I think it's on the other hand. So I am actually biased towards the mainstream narrative unless I see like red flags that point me in the other direction. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of red flags on a lot of things. I don't know what else to say. And I think the only thing, I mean, whether we're talking COVID or Building 7 or any of those things, I mean, it's not that I necessarily have an opinion. My opinion is I don't know what the heck is going on in almost anything, but it sure, I sure see a lot of red flags wherever I look. I think just having humility and and realizing that it's okay to just say, hey, I don't know. Like everybody needs to have an opinion about something, and why is that? I don't have. I mean I just feel like for most things my answer is I don't know. I can't even begin to know. So that's kind of my take on the world. I know there's one thing I know, and that's if you are a no coiner in 2023, you really need to get on that and turn things around because the window is closing, man.
Yeah, wake up and smell the truth, right? And yeah, a lot of people are resistant to even seeing what's in plain sight. And I think there is a lot to be said for the FUD that is continuing to be fed to them and how susceptible they are to just believe the mainstream legacy media, right? And how it's difficult once you've been gaslit and controlled by the system. Therefore, it creates this sort of smokescreen where it's harder for some people to discover that truth, right? But there is hope yet, and obviously the proofs in the exponential going up forever, Laura, growth that is Bitcoin. And listening to what you've been talking about in terms of questioning things like you don't know and potentially being suspicious about these narratives. I'm guessing that's why you've gone for remaining anonymous, and now that you're do not comply, DN comply, which obviously now I'm very interested, and I'm conscious I've been talking a lot. How you've got to be in there, and what led you to there once you discovered Bitcoin, and when was that you discovered Bitcoin? So what's been that journey for you?
Okay. Well. All right. So I'll get back to my discovery story in just a moment. But you kind of embedded in that question is why did I choose to a pseudonym for my identity? And I think the biggest reason is I mean, there's a little bit of OPSEC in there. I mean, I am certainly a whole coiner, and if you are a whole coiner, letting hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people know your identity is really fucking stupid. And like just last week, Ledger came out with you could buy this cool looking orange hat with Bitcoin on it, and you'd have to be out of your mind to go out in public wearing wearing that, unless
I saw that.
it's like, are you kidding me? you're basically announcing to the world that you're a whole coiner. And but I mean, I think the larger reason why I chose a pseudonym was just because I've already had a career. I'm kind of I don't really need to work anymore, but I put several decades into being a subject matter expert in an unrelated field, and I've done plenty of I've just had plenty of pats on the back. I've had plenty of attention. I've had all the I've had a full career, and I think that so I've already gotten more credit. My mother's proud of me. It's like I've done all those things, and I've had a full career, so I don't really need any more praise. And I don't care about yeah, there's there, I'm not claiming to be some enlightened person, but I am saying definitively that there's no ego involved in what I'm doing, because I'm doing it, by the very fact that I'm doing it anonymously. It means that I can't really receive meaningful praise, and nobody's going to lift me up as being like one of the non-plebs in the Bitcoin world, and that's what I want. I want to I want whatever I contribute to Bitcoin to be coming from a very, very pure place. Like, that's really important. I want my motivations to be pure. And so, being a pleb and being working under a pseudonym is a big part of that. As is the idea that another thing that keeps my motivations pure is I pay for my own website and hosting out of my pocket, and I don't run ads. There is no way that anyone can send me any Satoshis. There's no way I don't run ads. There's no way for me to sell out. And I'm not saying that that businesses and podcasts that run ads or whatever, or take in revenue from other sources, are necessarily worthy of approach or whatever. But it creates an opportunity anyway to kind of go to make compromises that I will never even be tempted with, because I make no attempt to monetize. I mean, I have to say, like, I mean, I'm into all kinds of vices, but one vice that I just despise is gambling. I just think it's a sickness, and I think that it's an industry just full of scumbags, because I think that if you look at what gambling can do to people susceptible to it, it's just a morally indefensible business, and it really bothers the living shit out of me when podcasts I respect and have great content will run ads for Bitcoin casinos. It's just really, I find that very disturbing. So we can get into my origin story, but that's why I chose to operate under a pseudonym, and on top of that, never make any attempts to monetize.
This is a very important point, because this is somewhere where we are at currently. So we're recording this late November, early December, to not give away the date today, and because it will go out probably January. And, we've been contacted by a few Bitcoin companies who ask for sponsorships. Okay. They obviously ask, like, hey, can we have our founder on your show? And, we're generally quite open, because, I used to work in the media landscape. I know how these things work, pay you a bit and it's favorable coverage. But if they come on, they're here to talk about their rabbit hole story, why Bitcoin benefits, and we're not here to, shill anything. But I can imagine the bigger the show grows, the more you have to ask yourself these questions, if this is something you want to look into. And I am fully on board with you. I don't really understood why a lot of the big podcasters took on, it's one thing if you take on something like a mining company who's publicly traded. I mean, granted, most of them lost a shit ton of money since going public anyway. So this is sort of the gamble you play if you play along in the traditional markets. But if you then go in and you accept money from these high yield products, which if you actually speak to a lot of the people who work in the asset management world, everyone was just gambling on the GBTC premium, and at the end of the day, the loss that they took in. So that's where they over speculated, and all of these things went bust. So I think it's a hard needle to find a way. And if you don't stick to a certain system, that can be Bitcoin for you, that can be different things, I think it's very hard to break out of this because they're humans and they get greedy, and they get just a little bit more for a little bit less, and that's where sort of that death spiral starts. Just as a comment from our end, I don't know if you want to add something to this before we continue to your Bitcoin story.
Yeah, I very much do. I mean, just since you've just shared kind of where you guys are at in your show's evolution, and it sounds to me like you're kind of at the stage of reaching critical mass, and I would just say like now is the time to like focus on asking your audience for support, not in sending you sats necessarily, but just trying to reach out and form connections with your audience. Just saying, hey, if you have any comments on the show, just email me. Like, just one or two interactions with one of your followers creates a much more durable and lasting impression, and it's like it separates you from just being up on a pedestal away from all the people who are like listening to you. All the way back at the start of the mainstream internet, there was this idea of a musician wrote this really important piece about true fans. And I forget what it was, but I think he said you need 1,000 true fans. That's all you needed. Like, you didn't need to a record company, and you didn't need to go platinum with a record. If you wanted to become financially viable as a recording artist in the year 2000, you needed like 1,000 fans who would just support you at every turn, who would buy every one of your CDs, who would come out and see you on tour and bring their friends. That's all you needed. And I think that concept, even though it's a couple of decades old, is it has had no loss of relevance whatsoever.
Still holds up,
yeah. It's something yeah. I mean, if you want to take your show to the next level, what I want to say, just as kind of a little experiment, is hey, anyone listening to this who has really liked this show and put it at the top of their subscription list, why don't you write in and just begin to make a connection and begin to show some passion about this show, and reach out to you guys, and and just become part of the tribe. Seth Godin wrote a good book called Tribe, by the way, that lays down a lot of these concepts. But yeah, connecting with your listeners is infinitely preferable to monetizing in questionable ways, and will get you to the same level of sustainability without making compromises.
Guys, if there's any confusion, we've just had a bit of a technical issue on my end. It's my fault, but hopefully, I mean, this is a fascinating conversation, so I'm sorry if there's been any interruption in that. But it's interesting what you were saying, Dan Comply, is in the content side of things. We believe here at Rabbit Hole Stories in the whole value for value concept. We want to deliver value, and we're very much interested in people's feedback to us, and we want to communicate in the best way possible to our listeners, and hopefully that will encourage other people to listen to the stories that come on, to resonate with people and spread the signal of Bitcoin. And during each of our video recordings, if you're listening to this on audio, if you went over to YouTube, you'll see 2 QR codes at the bottom where you can just zap us some sats from there. So you can sort of give the show some sats if you believe there is some value in what we're saying. So we're very sort of connected to our audience that way.
Or if you feel like you don't want to send sats, which is totally fine. I mean, we all get if you want to hold on, or, you know, if life gets in the way and you need to hold on to your Bitcoin. Believe me, I had to sell Bitcoin at some pretty stupid situations in my life. It's like the DN Comply said, if you have a suggestion, send us an email. I always link the email in the show notes. You can obviously tweet at us. I'm just thinking what else they could do. We're on Nostr. We're on every fucking social media platform. Just look for Rabbit Hole Stories, Bitcoin, or Bitcoin Podcast, and you'll find us pretty quickly. And make your voices heard, because this is what this show is all about at the end. We want to give the perspective of how many different people and stories and, you know, life events are in Bitcoin. Because correct me if I'm wrong, DN Comply, could that be somehow how you got into Bitcoin, or what's your actually Bitcoin origin story? Like, how did you discover it?
Well, I've told this story on a couple of the podcasts I've been on, including my very first one with John Vallis. But I think as origin stories go, it's kind of a cool one. I was visiting. I used to live in Maui back for about 3 or 4 years, starting in like 2008, and I guess at the end of 2014, I'd been out of Maui for almost 3 years, and I had a friend who was divorced and had a couple of young children, and her children were spending the summer on the mainland with their dad. So I rented their bedroom from my old friend, and one day I was walking down the street in Paia, and this hippie was like, "Hey, man," and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "I have to catch a flight to the U.S. and so I can't bring my weed with me. Here, please take this." So I was like, "Cool." So a little later on, I was back at the house and I was smoking some of the weed and got really baked, and I was like, what do I do now? I think I'll listen to a podcast. So I opened up Joe Rogan's podcast, and there are, you know, you look at the last 10 episodes, who was on lately, who do I want to listen to, you know, what names leap out. And there was this one, the name that left out was somebody I'd never heard of before, some guy with a crazy name, Andreas Antonopoulos. Andreas Antonopoulos, what the hell? So I was just like, who the hell is this guy? So I started listening to it, and it was a Bitcoin podcast. It was the second or third he did with Rogan, and I had known about Bitcoin since right when it came out, because I was a reader of Slashdot, and it just I thought it was just like I knew that, like, Beanie Babies, and, you know, there would be investment fads. And I remember like watching Bitcoin go up to like a, you know, insane amount and crash and go up and crash. And I had the feeling I'd buy some eventually, but it just struck me as being too high. And it just seemed like you know, there was something about it that appealed to me. But then I started listening to Andreas talking to Rogan, and I just feel like I was lucky enough to have a background in a bunch of fields that led me to connect the dots immediately. Like, I already knew and understood public key encryption, like the fundamental concepts behind that. And back when I was in high school, I just found economics an interesting topic, and I took an AP class, and then beyond that, I read The Wealth of Nations and Das Kapital, and I had, you know, just a general understanding since the Reagan era of the fundamentals of economics, and even how money is created, which frankly most people have no idea about how money is created. And that's one of the reasons that, that Bitcoin is still under $1 million. There's just so few people who realize what a mess the financial system is and how just brutally manipulated it is for the gain of, it's a big club and you ain't in it. So I knew about public key encryption. I knew about the fundamentals of macroeconomics and economic policy and the Federal Reserve and the national debt. And I also had done a little, a few hundred hours of just very high level, simple coding in my life between BASIC and Pascal and Fortran and HyperTalk. So I knew scripting and high level programming languages. And I think if you spend more than 20 hours of your life just even writing a program in BASIC or whatever, that will rewire your brain a bit, because there is no way but to think in a linear way. And you also realize that that's kind of the glue that holds everything else together. Hey, I could write a scripting language that issues tokens every 10 minutes and uses public key encryption so that your token is secure. And then I could say, like the entire kind of organization of the white paper, if you know scripting and you know public key encryption already, you'll be able to kind of connect the dots. And even though you certainly can't create Bitcoin from scratch, like you don't have that degree of technical knowledge, you'd have enough to kind of know that somebody competent could do it. And then if you also know what a fucking disaster the financial system is and how it's, marching us towards the abyss, you can very quickly understand, holy crap, this entire system is, fundamentally ingenious, so long as it's been created, so long as there aren't any bugs in the overall thinking. And by this point, 2014, Bitcoin had been around 4 years. And if you know the Lindy effect, I would be very, 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 very skeptical if Bitcoin were 4 weeks old that it could last, 100 years. But at a year, maybe it could. At a couple of years, at 4 years, well, this has a shot. So, and now in 2023, after the block size wars and China's mining ban and all that, we've had one test after another, and every time Bitcoin emerges unscathed and stronger than ever. So the Lindy effect is really backing us up here in a way that goes way beyond where we were in 2014. Because the pump had been primed by my knowing, by having a dilettante's knowledge of coding and economics and game theory and public key cryptography, all the dots, I was able to connect the dots so that by the end of the show, by the end of this 3-hour podcast, I basically decided that I was going to put my entire life savings, which weren't all that much, but I was going to put essentially my entire life savings into Bitcoin. And at that point, Bitcoin was going for about $320 a coin. And, I realized that, hey, this stuff is a couple of orders of magnitude scarcer than gold, and yet it's selling for 1/5 the price. That's crazy. And if I can just buy 21 Bitcoins, I would own 1/1,000,000th of the supply on a planet with 7 billion people. That's an incredible, just the basics of the math were such that I realized that this was just, and if it worked, and there was no guarantee, but the Lindy effect was beginning to suggest it might, that this was either going to be, it was a binary outcome. Either being a multi-whole coiner would make me incredibly wealthy, or I was going to lose everything. And YOLO, man, YOLO. I just, put it all into Bitcoin and haven't looked back. And here we are in 2023, and I've never sold a Satoshi. I did give an entire Bitcoin away to a close friend of mine, just because I wanted him to be a whole coiner. But apart from that, I've never parted with a single Satoshi.
I suppose I've got a couple of things to say. What struck me when I was hearing you talk is I mean, shout out first of all to Andres. He can articulate Bitcoin better than most, I feel, and he does a good job at connecting with the audience that he's presenting to in a way that can only really sort of it's difficult to articulate something as abstract as Bitcoin. I think Andreas does a fantastic job at doing that, and he gets a lot of shit in the space now from hardcore Bitcoin maxis and things like that, and we can talk about that. But what I was particularly sort of thinking when you was talking is the energy and the passion that you talk about Bitcoin, and this is what I really get from being the co-host here at Rabbit Hole Stories, is listening to what Bitcoin has done for people, and the energy and passion it gives them, and a sense of purpose. And what also came across my mind at the same time was we all say very similar things. We all think in similar ways in terms of how Bitcoin is structured and how it can be of benefit to the world. And I'm just wondering what your vision is for Bitcoin in the future. What does the world look like for you under what we're hoping to be a Bitcoin standard one day?
Well, I think one thing, and I've said this on at least one other podcast, but Bitcoin has obviously changed my life financially. I'm going through a very difficult time right now where I have a major expense to deal with, and luckily I can now cover that, and it's just a tiny portion of my net worth, whereas it would have been devastating to me 5 years ago. And I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have this wealth behind me. But so there's that. I'm not an inquisitive person. I'm not going to be flying private or even first class for that matter. I like to slum it, regardless of my wealth. But the real way it's changed my life as somebody, it just turns out because of my analytical skills, I've always been a really talented investor, and I've done very well with my investments. And the only times that I failed, like really, my two worst investments were related to friends who had poor character that I didn't see, and it was just devastating to me in a couple of levels in terms of what I lost financially, but also just when you get betrayed and you get let down by somebody you love and trust, it is a kick in the nuts. Like you will, if that's never happened to you, if you've never put out and really sacrificed for somebody you love and believe in, it's the most painful thing you could ever go through, and that's when I've lost financially, and it's I wouldn't wish that experience on anybody. But one of the things, apart from how it changed my financial situation, Bitcoin really throws into stark relief the people within Bitcoin who are working in the most honorable ways imaginable and the people who aren't. I think we talked offline a little bit about people who, fund their podcast from gambling sites or whatever, or from selling ads to Celsius or, questionable custodians or any of that stuff. Bitcoin for some reason, there's something intrinsic to it, probably related to how it solved the Byzantine generals problem. There's something intrinsic to it that really puts the spotlight on trust and character and honorability, and it just reveals people's honorability within the Bitcoin ecosystem in a way that doesn't seem to be revealed outside of the world of Bitcoin. Outside of the world of Bitcoin, character is kind of masked, just like, in Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, everybody going about their business during the day out in society looks normal and interchangeable and people you could love and trust. But, at night, when you go into the forest, if you really want to know what's going on, you'll see who the people of questionable character really are. I mean, that's the reason that story is still universally taught in the 9th grade in the United States. It's a story everybody has to read, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Not that it's beautifully written, but that theme will tug at you over the decades if you read it as a younger person. And Bitcoin is that spotlight that reveals character. It's just kind of hard to be a Bitcoiner in Bitcoin circles and to not be confronted with the choice of do I sell out now for some easy sats? Well, fuck no. At least where I'm concerned. And it's just I kind of feel that now, armed with Bitcoin and also having been kicked in the nuts a couple of times by close friends, I'm never gonna have that happen again. Thank God, because my heart couldn't take it.
Yes, and I think this is the beauty about Bitcoin. It really teaches you immediately. So as I've said previously, I did get paid before I took on my current job. I did get paid by a few clients in Bitcoin because it was just easier. They had their main offices in America. I live in Europe. God forbid. I mean, I had banks who, would allow local bank accounts in dollars, and they could use the shitty wiring system, whatever the US has, but it would cost me a lot of money. It would take weeks. We all know the issue. And with getting paid weekly by them, because I set up basically that they pay me in Lightning instead of on-chain, because, it was cheap and all of these things for them. And, it was nice to get paid weekly instead of monthly. I was able to solve that issue. But unfortunately, at my time back then, my income in Bitcoin related to the income I made in fiat was just not covering it. Granted, this is the lesson I took away from it. I was living in a too much expensive city, really having cut down my costs. But, if you have an expensive rent, unless you're able to find stuff like a roommate, or you can't really move out for other reasons, think of family reasons, etc. This really kicks you in the nuts if you have to sell a portion of your Bitcoin to pay because people are too stupid to accept you in Bitcoin. But then again, as soon as I had to do it, I went shit, and now I'm going to stack even harder. You know what I mean? Like it was a painful thing to do because I had to pay the bills. But then at the second time, looking back, I went, okay, we either make sure that you cover enough in fiat that you don't have to sell, or, and this is sort of what I started doing, if I, let's say, have to sell, I don't know, $400, I would try and buy back 800. So I would try to make, as soon as I had to convert it, buy it back at that price, even add a bit on top of that, and somehow extend your reserves in Bitcoin. I know it's not always easy for everyone because we all have different lives and different perspectives, but that realization of sitting there and going, the minute you actually sell it, it teaches you something in return, and you immediately want to get back on. I mean, I have invested in gold. I did invest in some tech stock, but this is the best teacher you could possibly get in life, at least in my opinion. Whatever you do later on, that's obviously down to you. But just having that constant feedback loop within Bitcoin, within the community, for whatever reasons, debating if Andreas Antonopoulos is good or bad or whatever. This is what really fascinates me, that something as simple as Bitcoin essentially can emerge and then sort of be a turnaround for a lot of people out there. And it's like you said, the Uncomply, just a small portion of the world actually has realized this. So once everyone gets on board, this is potentially really a game changer.
Well, Joel, you're obviously on the younger side, probably still in your 20s.
Yeah, by the time the episode is out, I'm still 27. So, so yeah, still in my 20s.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So don't join the 27 club on us. That's all I ask. Stay away from Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. Yeah, we need you here. So, but somebody your age. I mean, you're less than half my age. But there's a reason we've just met, but you're obviously a frugal guy who's not like living high on the hog. And there's a reason why you had to sell your Bitcoin to make rent. It's because in the UK, just like the US, but even more severe, perhaps, the constantly degrading currency has caused housing to be monetized, and that pushes up the price of housing in relation to the value of the pound, and in turn pushes up rents to levels that are several times higher adjusted for income than they were when your dad was your age. And I remember back when I went to college, I was in this really beautiful part of town, living in a converted garage for $400 a month, and I was within a couple blocks of the beach, and my life kicked ass. And since then, all of those houses have been knocked down, and mini mansions have gone up, and people don't even live in the things. It's like a Chinese ghost city, where the whole point of its existence is wealthy people investing in a second home that they scarcely use for the purpose of hoping that real estate will continue to appreciate in relation to the dollar. And that effect is why you were being bled month by month at an unreasonable rate for your housing, and why you were forced to sell your Bitcoin. But luckily, you had the knowledge and the strength of character to be like, I'm not parting with this for very long. I'm going to, move heaven and earth to buy back even more. For every sat you make me sell, I'll buy two,
Okay, just a quick remark there. If you actually teach this to people that, if you need to spend, or even if you want to spend your sats, it's okay, but still have skin in the game. Get back into it, Life comes at you in every shape or form, but to have the knowledge to always be, I wouldn't say always be there for Bitcoin, but like to have Bitcoin there and to have the option to still purchase it, convert it to fiat in a very cheap manner. This is where you actually should be proactive and not too lazy, because we all know it. Once crazy times are back in, people get lazy and, they may forget to restack or whatever. But once you still have the opportunity, you should definitely get on board. And I'll shut up now so Ian can add his 2 cents as well.
No, I was just going to say, firstly, Joel, like your story about how to work out your own financial literacy, right? You've had to really sort of think. You've seen the value of Bitcoin, and once you see the value, you know that selling it for fiat is painful, right? Because you just want to get back onto that value as that store of value as quick as possible, right? So you have to work out ways to be financially literate, and this is things that people every day don't actually have the privilege of being able to understand, because they don't even understand what value is or even what money is in the first place. So I think a lot of people, normies, if you want to call them that, are so far away and detached from the essence of what value is. And with regards to the whole property side of things and the how expensive property is now, because obviously, as you said, the Uncomply, houses are being used as a store of value. which increases the costs of those houses, which puts people further down the ladder of getting onto a property or being able to live in relative comfort. Particularly like around London, you see a lot of younger people now. They're living in one house, but there's like 4 or 5 people living in different rooms. They're sharing a house that would otherwise should be down to its utility value, owing to if it is under Bitcoin, it should go down in that sense. But I don't know if you want to ride on the back of anything of what I've said, Dean Comply.
I just want to say, 5-10 minutes ago, I was talking about buying entire Bitcoins. Obviously, the reality has changed today, especially for people in Joel's situation, who's not making that much money but still wants to stack sats. I think if you're not buying entire Bitcoins, and I think if you happen to be quite well off, being a whole coiner and just deciding, hey, you'll take your lumps, it's either going to zero or it's going to the moon. That's a pretty great investment if you still have the funds available to readily purchase an entire Bitcoin. I mean, it really puts you. Do the math. 21 million into 7 billion. I think it's something like, if you could only buy one Bitcoin, if the rules were everybody gets either one Bitcoin or zero, it's something like 1 out of every 400 people could have a Bitcoin. So it really puts you into rarefied a level of holding if you're able to own an entire one. I mean, the numbers would be even crazier once you realize that there's the Michael Saylors who own thousands, and then there's all the plebs who own 1/10 of a Bitcoin. To get up to an entire Bitcoin probably puts you into the realm of 1 in several thousand people. Hey, if you have, if you're lucky enough to have hundreds of thousands of quid or dollars in assets, buying 1 Bitcoin is still a relatively moderate investment. Now, where does that leave people who couldn't even begin to afford a Bitcoin? How much Bitcoin should you be thinking of that you could still afford and that's reasonable? That's something I get into my Bitcoin basics essay, and I think we might as well very quickly cover it here. Like what's an amount of Bitcoin that somebody like you, Joel, could aspire to thicken up your stack and still know that it matters? And I think in that respect, it makes sense to take the 7 million or 7 billion people on Earth and divide that into the 21 million coins that will ultimately exist. How much Bitcoin is that? And it turns out to be essentially 0.0027 Bitcoin. More or less. I think my math is, we just hit 7 billion. So anyway, the point is, it's something like 0.0027 Bitcoin. And I just want to say, I say this in my essay, that I think if you write that down, that's a very useful amount of Bitcoin to know about, because that is one person's worth of Bitcoin. And so it just stands to reason that if you can purchase that much Bitcoin, that's a very significant increment of Bitcoin to own. And I just opened up my MacBook and typed 0.0027 Bitcoin to USD. And what's the date? It's the 30th of November, right? And right now, Bitcoin's selling for $37,700. It's going to be undoubtedly different by the time this episode airs. But it just so happens that right now, that quantity of Bitcoin, 0.0027 Bitcoin, is worth almost exactly $100, $101.80. And that's what it costs to buy a very substantial amount of Bitcoin in a world of hyper Bitcoinization. So, if I didn't have it, I'd be on as a straight man. I would be, if I couldn't get it any other way, I would be on my way to a truck stop to suck people off for $40 a throw to raise that. I could raise that $100 in a couple of hours. And that's what if I had no other way to get it, that's what I would do, because you gotta end up with $100 worth of Bitcoin, one way or another.
You heard it. Get Bitcoin any means possible.
Yeah. As long as nobody's getting hurt, do what it takes.
As long as nobody's getting hurt, but maybe if people get off, that's fine.
Yeah. Just the point is, do what it takes. Wash dishes. Do what it takes. If you can set aside and hodl a few increments worth of 0.0027 Bitcoin. If you could buy 5 times that, if you could put $500 into Bitcoin, that's a fuckload of Bitcoin. And then the other thing I want to say to piggyback on that is buy it and commit to hodling it for the next decade. Like, come hell or high water, you're not going to sell. And it's a binary outcome. It's either going to zero or it's going to the moon. And Bitcoin, the one thing I'm sure, I'll bet my left arm and my left nut on this. If I'm lucky enough to be back on your podcast in 10 years, Bitcoin might have failed, and it might go to the moon, but there is no fucking way it's going to be selling for $38,000 each or anything like that. It's a binary outcome. And so just sign up to go for the entire ride. And if Bitcoin triples in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, you might feel tempted to sell. Fuck that. No, you're going to hodl. You're going to be a hodler of last resort and hold this thing for another 10 years and just see this story through to the end. Do not put down the book halfway through, because this book is going to have a very interesting ending, I assure you.
Or some might say a happy ending.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm broadcasting from Japan and not Thailand, but whatever. Close enough.
Speaking of happy endings, that's the perfect segment, actually, Ian. We like to finish our episodes, and comply with a little bit of a challenge for our guests, because we want to prove certain narratives in Bitcoin. Some may check out, some may not. And the one we want to prove is that all roads eventually lead to Bitcoin. And we thought we'd come up with a pretty funny game. So we'll give you either a person, a word, something related to that you'll hear in a second, and you have to make a bridge to Bitcoin. It can be philosophical, it can even be a personal experience of yours, or it can be very simply that you say you can buy or sell this thing with Bitcoin. So it's up to you what you want to say. And we thought the word of the day for you to bridge to Bitcoin is pièce de résistance, or piece of resistance, depending which side you're coming from, because I did read your Bitcoin Basics article and also saw it in French, and I speak French, so I thought that would be a good fit. So how does pièce de résistance fit back to Bitcoin?
Well, gosh, I've read my Victor Hugo, and I probably identify with Robespierre or whatever. I don't know. But no, I don't. My exposure to France was visiting Paris and looking for the Bastille, and then discovering that they tore it down, and being bummed because I really wanted to go see the Bastille, and instead I saw the Statue of Liberty, or Libertad statue, and I was really disappointed. No, my knowledge, you're asking me something that is not up my alley. As close as I get to understanding French culture is that I think Rush's song Bastille Day is one of their very finest pieces of work on one of their very worst albums. But I don't even know what Pièce de Résistance actually means. So yeah, you've chosen something that I can't even begin to comment on.
It's a piece of resistance, so it's the last resort before essentially a system breaks or something goes bust. It's in terms of food also the last food you can't digest, so maybe that helps you a bit in the bridge.
Okay. I like that. I'm gonna have to dig into that concept. But yeah, it's like it's the item you keep in your pantry for when all else fails. And if you're smart, by the way, you're keeping like beans in your pantry. Like I have more beans than I can lift because I suspect we're heading into something sketchy, and those are not beans that I'm gonna eat at any point other than when faced with an emergency, because they're a couple of years out of date at this point. But we all need that. We all need Bitcoin is your lifeboat. Bitcoin is your lifeboat, and you do not sell your lifeboat. That's what I have to say on that. If you're on the Titanic and you have your own little lifeboat and you haven't hit the iceberg yet, and somebody's offering you a couple $1,000 for your lifeboat, do not sell, because I think we're on our way to hitting the iceberg economically, and it's just really a matter of time. Like if you understand. Listen to Lynn Olden, listen to James Lavish, listen to Lawrence Lepard. I mean, these people will lay it out for you about what is going to happen, and really the only debate is the time frame. It could happen next week. They're really good at kicking the can down the road. Maybe things still haven't crashed in 5 years, but we are very much, as James Lavish would put it, in a debt spiral. And we're very far along. It's following exponential properties, and I think we've passed into the hockey stick part of the curve, and it's inevitable that this system has already broken, and the fallout is going to be unpredictable. Anyway, buy some fucking Satoshis. Like, you have to do it. Buy and hold. Make friends with honorable, deepen your connection with honorable people, and let's build up a system that can that's not connected to this young Goodman Brown system run by horrible compromises and wicked people that we currently have.
Absolutely. I mean, there everything's falling apart right now, and we need to really sort of think about how we can protect ourselves, how we can save our wealth. And for God's sake, guys, save Bitcoin for a rainy day, because that rainy day is just around the corner. And I couldn't have articulated it any better than you, DN Comply. And I've got to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights and your rabbit hole story with us here today. It's been an interesting episode. And where can people find you? Are you on the socials at all? And where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on. Yeah, you can see all of that at my website, dncomply.com, which I don't monetize at all. That'll link to my Twitter and to my Nostr and to other things. But I just want to say, above all else, even Satoshi admitted, a man or entity or woman of limitless gifts, said that Bitcoin was uniquely hard to explain because, quoting, there's nothing to compare it to. If I have any gift at all, it's in explaining complicated, weird things. Like, that's what I've done my entire life. And I regard my Bitcoin basics piece as the finest piece I've ever written. It will take you less than an hour to read, and it is what I hope it's the ultimate orange pill to Bitcoin. And I really would be so grateful to every one of your readers who took the time to read it and to read it, and every one of your listeners who took the time to read it, and moreover to hey, we all need a Bitcoin. We all need a recommendation or a default recommendation. I mean, your job as a Bitcoiner is to give people the orange pill. It's not to like offer a nuanced explanation of Bitcoin. If Satoshi had problems doing that, you're going to have problems doing that. What I'm urging you to do is to say, hey, whether it's my essay or something else, find a default motivation, a default reference to offer to people who want to learn more. Get people, your pitch, I think, is basically, hey, this will change your life if you can invest a few hours into studying it. Start here. And use your social capital. People, your friends and family, hopefully respect you enough that if you urge them to do an hour's worth of reading, they'll listen to you. That is the way that you can really orange pill. Use your social capital to get interested people to follow your default recommendation. And then if your default recommendations are good enough, many of them will likely be orange pilled. And, I hope in my small and anonymous way, this was my contribution to moving the needle for Bitcoin. Because as finishing up, as Corey Clipson has put it repeatedly, and this is one of the most important points in all of Bitcoin, we are in a race. Like the Janet Yellens of the world, the Ben Bernankes, they're looking to shut this down and create central bank digital currencies. And the only way that we are going to come out on top is to orange pill as many people as quickly as possible so that Bitcoin becomes too big to kill. And we still aren't close to being there. We've gained a lot of progress thanks to people like Andreas, thanks to people like Michael Saylor, each of who've sped up the Bitcoin timeline by at least a year. But at the end of the day, hyper Bitcoinization is not going to happen because of Michael Saylor. It's going to happen because of tens of thousands of plebs who are just relentlessly orange pilling their friends and family. And if you can, if you in doing that decide that my Bitcoin basics piece is your default recommendation, I would just be really grateful and honored. But whatever you find that you think is best, choose that and get it out to everybody possible.
You heard it, guys. You better check out those show notes because we're most certainly going to be linking everything in there that Dean Comply has contributed to the Bitcoin ecosystem. And thank you so much for being able to have that gift, that being able to explain these abstract things in a way that can put that signal out there for people to understand it. So thank you for your finite time here with us here at Rabbit Hole Stories. And for everyone else that's listening, thank you for your time as well, and stay curious.